In this video I'm going to give you 3 ways that you can loosen up with your artwork, whether that's drawing or painting. Hello, I'm Tracy Eastham, I'm an artist and I'm the owner of Art School by Subscription. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is a space where we cover videos on all things related to concept, experimentation and creative connection, which is what my art school is all about. So I hope you enjoy this video and all the other videos that I've got on those topics. So there's lots of ways we can loosen up with our artwork. I'm just going to focus on 3 today, very accessible ways, very quick and immediate ways that you can loosen up with your drawing and with your sketching and with your painting. So the first one is the way we hold our tools, whether it's a pencil or a paintbrush. If I show you an example with a pencil, for example, we're taught to hold a pencil in the traditional pencil hold, which is close to the nib, with 3 fingers enclosing the pencil tightly. It's about control. It's about manipulating the pencil to do exactly what we want it to do, which is usually to write neatly. But with loose sketching and drawing, we don't necessarily want to be neat all the time, so we can immediately be looser with the way that we make our marks by simply holding the pencil in a different way. So you can hold the pencil further down the shaft towards the end. So holding it like this will immediately give you looser marks to work with, because you haven't got that intense control that you're used to when you're writing cursive writing. So holding it further down like that immediately gives you a sketchier, looser handling of the medium. We can also of course change our grip so that we haven't got those 3 fingers holding it tightly, but instead maybe just 2 fingers holding the pencil, and further down as well will result in a much looser, sketchier style of making a mark. So those are very immediate, quick ways that anyone can make more sketchy marks, and it applies with a paintbrush or whatever medium you're using. As an extension to that, I'd also argue that another way we can loosen up is to loosen the contact between our hand and our arm and the table. So normally, again, we're taught to write, we're taught to draw in a certain way, which is to rest our whole arm onto the table and to hold the pencil tightly so we get lovely, sort of refined, controlled marks. We can, like I said, we can loosen up by holding the pencil differently, but simply lifting our arm off the table so that our wrist and our hand and our arm isn't resting on the table, but instead we're drawing loosely from above. Even if we're holding the pencil quite tightly, that will be another way to loosen up, because when we rest our hand on the table like that, we're restricting our movements to basically this. But lift our arm up and we can make these movements. We can bring in the whole gesture and movement of the arm to make our marks. The second way we can loosen up with our artwork, whether we're drawing or we're painting, is by working at an easel. So this is a surefire way to loosen up, because not only are we loosening up our arm, but we're loosening up our whole body. Our whole body can move around this piece of paper, allowing for a much freer application of marks on our artwork. And it applies to drawing and painting, and it applies to whether we're working quite small or working quite big. I think some people assume that when we're on easels we have to be working on a big canvas, but I've just got a A4 piece of cartridge paper here. It's perfectly fine to use an easel with small paper. We can extend the loosening potential of working with an easel by how far away we stand from the easel. So if we're working with a brush, for example, I've just got a bit of ink here, and we work on an easel and we walk really close up and we're making these, I'm resting my arm on the easel again, and I'm making these little marks, controlled and refined. Yes, you're probably going to still be loose because you're on an easel, but you're still limiting yourself. We can extend our loosening up potential of working at an easel by simply taking a step back and having an outstretched arm when we're making our marks. And already we're loosening up our mark making just because we're stood a little bit further away. We can extend that even further by changing the type of brush that we use. So that was a fairly small round brush. If I move to a wider flat brush, that's a really good way of loosening up, because we literally can't make neat refined marks because our brush is too wide. We have to make long expressive marks because of the brush that we're using. That's a really good way of loosening up. Working at an easel and working with a wider brush than you need. And the third and final way of loosening up is by using a wet on wet technique with all the mediums that you use. So this applies to whether we're working in watercolours or alla prima with oils, or even with drawing materials. We can often apply water to the medium, or we can draw on a wet background, and that will loosen up the mark making. But wet on wet basically means that you've got a wet background that you apply wet medium to. So if I wet my background there and then apply colour to it, the colours merge together, they blend, they flow. You allow the medium to do what it wants to do a little bit. It takes over, and you instantly utilise a looser approach because you're letting the wetness of the medium to take over, and you become less interested in details and more interested in creative effects, artistic effects. You start to enjoy the colour a bit more, you start to loosen up a bit more. And you can use wet on wet techniques with any medium. I'm using a combination of watercolour and ink, and they're interacting in really beautiful ways, and I'm allowing the paint to sort of do what it wants a little bit. I'm guiding it, but I'm also just sort of letting it take over, creating a really lovely wet on wet loose effect. So whether you're working in oils, acrylics, watercolours, mediums, you can get some amazing water soluble charcoal now even. Using a wet on wet technique is a really good way of loosening up. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss out on my future videos.